Hey everyone, and welcome. So, today I want to continue the conversation about the world and if our world is truly ending or not. Now, this is episode 2, right? So, we'll be continuing the conversations from episode 1. But before I begin, I have a few things that I would like to talk about first. So, the first thing I want to say is that I am not a native English speaker. English is not my first language. So, if I make any mistakes or if my English isn't perfect, then I do apologize. I pretty much learned English all by myself, so I do apologize if my English isn't perfect. Now, the second thing that I want to say is that all the things that I'm going to present here in this video, they are my own interpretations, my own concepts, my own way of seeing things, right? So if you by chance don't agree with anything that I'm saying here, then by all means, right? You have always your own mind, your own intellect, your own thoughts, your own self, and you should never feel like you should be pressured to accept or believe anything that I'm saying here. As I said, you can always choose to believe whatever you wish. And finally, the third thing that I want to say is that, as I said, this is part 2, right? This is episode 2 of this topic that I'm talking about, if the world is ending or not. So here I would, if by chance you're watching this and you haven't watched the first episode, then I would invite you to do so right before watching this one, because I'm basically going to pick up from where we left off. And not only that, I would also recommend or suggest for you to watch my other video analysis too, if you so choose, if you want to do that as well, because then you'll have a greater understanding of all my meanings, right? I am doing them in an episodic format, and I'm dividing them into topics, so you could always choose those that are of your liking. Now, with all of that out of the way, shall we get started? Or in this case, shall we continue? Now, from where we left off in the last episode, I was basically given an overview of our world today and how our world is and how our world functions and the systems that we have on our world, right? And I basically presented them into the whole perspective of left, right, and center, right? And this perspective, just as a brief reminder, from the way I see things, whenever we're talking about the left, we're talking about concepts that involve socialism, and in more extreme cases, communism. And if you go over to the right side, then you would see capitalism, right? And if you go to the center, then you would basically be a union or a concept from both sides that get used simultaneously towards a nation or their people. Now, I also, in that last video, I also talked about how the systems of our world today, how they are constantly evolving. And I also came to the conclusion that they are evolving probably more due to capitalism than they would have on communism or socialism. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't have evolved under those concepts. It only means that it evolved at a faster rate on the right side, on the capitalist side. So basically, society and the world and all the systems of our world today, they evolved at a really fast pace. And I also came to the conclusion that not only are the systems evolving, and whenever I mean the systems of the world, I basically mean everything, like economy, currency, trading, markets, you name it. It's basically everything. It's the systems of our world and how our world works and how things in our world are constantly evolving, right? And I came to the conclusion that as society evolves, as the world evolves together with society, then so does technology, and so does the services of the system that are provided to people and the world. They also evolve due to technology and science itself, and new technologies that are created in this system, on the systems of the world, in order for them to evolve and become even better. Now, the problem is that they are evolving so fast, so enormously fast, that it basically reached a point nowadays that it is beyond human understanding. What do I mean by that? I gave an example on the last video, how I talked about my time in school, right? And whenever I was at school, I would have sometimes a few classes with the teachers and some other scholars that would perhaps visit our school, and they would talk to us about the world, right? We wouldn't just learn like history or geography or math or science or things like that in school. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes we would also have a few different topics like economics, philosophy, sociology, and basically talking a little bit about the state of the world and how the world is. And it was basically just basically a conversation about how the world functions and what was expected, right? What did the school and the teachers expect us to do when we grew up, right? When we graduated, when we finished school and became adults ourselves. Sometimes we would have classes like that, and I remember in those classes, the teachers and some other scholars that would visit the school, they would openly talk to us about the state of the world, and especially about these systems of the world and how the world works. And in many cases, I remember this clearly, they would talk to us how we, the children at the time, how we were the hope of the future, and also perhaps even the hope of humankind as a whole, whenever the systems of the world are concerned. And they would say that not because they wanted us to be more hopeful for the future or things like that, or have a more sense of duty upon the world. There was, of course, that as well, but it was more than that. They were basically not only telling us how the systems of the world works, but they would also tell us that they themselves no longer had pretty much any hope of understanding these systems anymore, because they were getting too complicated, they were getting too complex, they were getting so infinitely intricate and so beyond their comprehension that it was their hope of the teachers and the scholars at the time that we, the children, right, at that time, that we would be the ones that would inherit those systems and understand those systems and then guide humanity and the world into a better future, because they themselves believe they pretty much couldn't understand it anymore. So their belief is that they believe that only those that were born in those conditions, only those that were born under such complicated systems, only truly the next generation that was born in those conditions, that only they could hope to understand those systems, right? The systems of the world, because pretty much the generation before my time, they pretty much had lost hope to understand it all. Now, what happens is that these systems, as I talk about the systems of the world, they have become so complicated that even the next generation, even the new generation that was supposed to inherit those systems and try to work and understand it all and then guide humanity towards a better future, even that generation itself, which in case I believe it would be around my generation, believe it or not, never once got the chance to actually be able to even understand those systems at all. Before we even finish school, before we even finish college, before we even had the chance to really to try and get a hand at those systems and how they work, so then maybe we could understand it all. Even before we had a chance of doing that, even in my generation, even before I finished college, the systems, they had already become so complicated, so very complex, so very beyond human understanding, that humanity themselves pretty much had given up hope of understanding or trying to train the next generation into understanding it. Instead, they went towards a very different approach, towards a very different route. And that approach, that route, was basically technology and science and the new technologies of the world, and pretty much investing everything into those technologies so that these technologies themselves could work on those systems. Because if the systems are too complicated for humanity to understand, then humanity came to the conclusion that only technology, only machines could hope to understand these systems, that even the best minds of the world couldn't necessarily understand them anymore. Because as I said, those systems had become too complicated. Those systems had become so very evolved and so very intricate that even the greatest minds of our time, of the world, they themselves could no longer understand them. And therefore, the only logical conclusion was to invest it all into machines, into technology, so that those machines, that technology could work or could do that work for the humans, right? It wasn't just a sense of substituting the humanity because humanity loves technology and humanity loves machines. It was more than that. Really, as I said, humanity could no longer understand those systems. The greatest minds could no longer understand those systems, so they made the only logical conclusion. If we cannot understand, then we should invest, we should put all of our efforts into something that will be able to understand and will be able to operate and will be able to perhaps even control it. And you see, that's basically what is happening right now with artificial intelligence, right? With AI. If you ever wondered why humanity and the world is investing so much into technology and into AI, into artificial intelligence, then there you go. That's the reason right there. It's because artificial intelligence, AI, is the greatest hope for humanity, for the world, and for how the world is today, in order to make those systems work and in order to keep those systems working. Because as I said, the systems have become too complicated. The systems have become too beyond human understanding. And if you can't understand the systems anymore, then all of a sudden you have a big problem on your hand. What do I mean by that? You could think of it as a time bomb that is constantly ticking, a time bomb that at any moment could explode and it could all go down. The systems themselves, the economical systems, banking, currency, trading, and all of that, they have become so very evolved and at such high stakes nowadays that any problems could happen, right? At any moment you could have a situation, at any moment you could have a problem. And if you can't predict those problems, if you can't predict what's going to happen, if you can't predict this time bomb, as I said, then at any moment this time bomb can go off and it can cause a huge repercussion on the whole world. So basically, even though the systems have evolved, they are also very volatile. They are also very fragile. And since humanity can't understand them anymore, then at any moment a problem may occur and humanity won't know how to solve it. Humanity won't know what to do because they can't control it, they can't understand it, they can't predict the problems, they can't do anything with those systems anymore. And at any moment, if you have a threat, or any moment you have something that may threaten these systems, then you won't be able to, not only you won't be able to see it coming, you might not be able to do anything regarding that. So then technology becomes not only the only possible solution on the very near future, but also the only hope, right? Because as I said, if humanity can no longer understand it, if humanity can no longer control it, if humanity has no control and no understanding over it, then all of a sudden you may have a big problem on your hands as a time bomb, where depending on how great the problems may arise, it might literally just bring it all down in a matter of moments, really. It could be just a few days. It could not only be that. I mean, it doesn't take much for the systems to go down should a problem occur. And if you think I'm exaggerating, then maybe if I give you an example, a little bit of an example, then it'll be a bit easier to understand. For example, think about a bank, right? Now, think about a really big bank, like a very prominent bank, a very rich bank, a bank that is so very successful and so very powerful, right? But what happens to this bank if everyone would suddenly want to take their money out of it? For instance, let's say that a rumor occurred, or a problem occurred, or something occurred that led to everyone wanting to go to that bank and take their money from that bank as fast as possible. What will happen to that bank next, right? What will happen to that bank immediately next? What will happen to that bank perhaps even the next day? Now, obviously, the bank itself would collapse. The system of the bank would collapse. Everything of the bank would collapse. in the very next day. You see, the economic systems, they are really good and they're very evolved, but at the same time they are very volatile, they're very fragile. So at any moment a problem could escalate. At any moment a problem, even if it is just a small amount of problem, could create a sense of mass panic, a sense of panic all around society. And if you have panic, if you have people panicking, then the systems itself, the whole the economy, the currencies, the transactions, everything, right? Depending on how bad things get, on how far the panic goes, then it could all collapse in just a matter of days. So these systems that the world has, they are very evolved, as I said, but at the same time, since they are so very beyond human understanding, humanity themselves can no longer understand them, so they can predict them, they can see whenever problems might arise. And all of a sudden, if you have a great problem on your hands, then it could escalate towards a very big problem, like something that could literally bring down everything all at once. That's how fragile the systems of the world are. And that's why so many people in the higher echelons of society are pushing forward, are depositing all of their assets, everything that they can, onto technology, and most especially onto artificial intelligence. Because as I said, since the systems are so complicated, since the systems are so very intricate and so beyond human understanding, then the hope of humanity is for the machines to do what humanity cannot. Is for the machines and artificial intelligence to understand the systems, since humanity and human beings can no longer understand them. So this is essentially the greatest hope that humanity has, is for machines and artificial intelligence to become more advanced, so that they themselves, these machines and this artificial intelligence, so they can control, they can operate the systems. Because the scenario that you have today is that the systems pretty much work by themselves, as the people that are working under these systems, they provide the work for the systems. But it has reached such a point in time now where things are so very complicated that these systems, they are working by themselves, and people are working by themselves in the systems, and humanity can no longer control it and can no longer understand it. That's why you have so much hope and so many assets being deposited into artificial intelligence and into machines. Now, here comes the question, right? What is going to happen next? And here is where the topic of the video comes back, right? If our world is truly ending or not. And to me, whenever I ponder about this topic, it's all a matter of perspective and where exactly are you looking at, or exactly what are you trying to see in the scenario that we have today. So whenever you're talking about, for instance, the people, right? The people nowadays that work in these systems, the people nowadays that have been working for the systems for a very long time, and especially about the future and the near future of these people, these human beings that are working for the systems. Now, as I said, these systems have evolved, and as they have evolved, the technology has evolved as well to better serve these services, right? The systems. And the problem is that whenever you have technology evolving, then I believe I gave this as an example in my last video. If I say this example again, maybe it'll be a little bit easier to understand. Think about a factory, right? Think about a factory that once employed a lot of people to produce or manufacture clothing or shoes, right? But what happens if this factory evolves and becomes more technological and employs more machines to advance their products and advance their manufacturing? What happens then, right? Then all of a sudden you have technology and you have machines that will do the work that was once done by humans, and they will do it in a much faster rate and with better quality as well. Because machines and technology, when they work right, they will pretty much do the work that humans do, but they will do it with perfection, right? Errors can always occur, but if technology comes to such a high degree, then the chances of the machine performing errors or making defective products, especially in a mass scale of production in a factory that is fully automated, then errors can always occur. But if technology has advanced so very much, then in most cases what you get is perfection, right? The machines can do it better, can do it faster, can do it more, and can do it with a higher quality. So that's pretty much what happens with a factory that evolves, right? With a factory that adopts more technology. But then what happens to the people, right, that work at this factory? Then all of a sudden the factory no longer needs the workers to work there, right? Because technology will do the work for them. So there's no longer need for workers there. And then for the longest time, like we heard this for years, but I think I think I talked about this in the last video as well, but I talk again now in this video as well, that I think I heard this perhaps even just a few years back, not even a decade ago, just a few years back. I heard people saying that in the workforce, right, in this example of a factory that I just told you, no matter how advanced the factory gets, I remember hearing this clearly, people would say, oh, but you always need human beings there, you always need human beings at the factories, because you always need people to operate those machines, right? You always need people operating those machineries at the factories, right? So then all that people need to do is to study more, go to get a higher education, so then they can become better at operating those machines, and then they will have a job, right? They will have work, and there you go, problem solved, right? Well, no, problem is not solved. Why is that? Because technology keeps improving and improving and improving, and it comes to a point where technology can pretty much operate themselves. Technology has reached such a high point now in society that you basically can have artificial intelligence operating all of the machines, in this factory, in this example of a factory that I just told you. Nowadays, technology has come such a long way that you can have artificial intelligence controlling the whole manufacturing process, controlling all of the machines. The artificial intelligence, it literally is a machine controlling other machines, controlling everything. That's how far technology has come, right? And then here comes the question, but what about people, right? What about the workers? What about all of the workers of this factory? What about everyone that was once working and now is being substituted by technology, by AI? What about them, right? And you see, that's the problem right there. That's the problem that we have in society nowadays. And I'll be honest with you, I don't see this problem getting solved or even slowing back, not even a little bit. Why is that? Because as I said, humanity's only hope for understanding the systems that have become so very, very evolved. The humanity need for understanding the systems are so great because the systems are so intricate and too beyond human understanding, that their only hope is for the machines to understand them. So then, even if you want to control artificial intelligence, even if you want to hold back artificial intelligence, if you want to hold back technology itself, because it is affecting people and it's affecting people's jobs, and a lot of people are losing their jobs more and more and more and more, and pretty soon a lot more people will lose their jobs because of artificial intelligence. And I don't mean just one specific job or the other, I literally mean everything, because machines are coming a long way, right? Artificial intelligence is coming a long way, so it won't take long, it won't take much time for artificial intelligence to, and for the machines to do anything that humans do, and to be able to do them better than the humans themselves. It won't take long for, no matter what humans do, the machines will be able to do it better. And even if people want to control that, even if people want to halt that, even if people want to by some means stop that from happening, so that the people, the workers, all of those that are working for the systems today and that have their jobs today, even if people want to by all means to control that and to stop that from happening, because you'll basically be a huge mass, an insane mass of people that would be out of jobs and will be unemployed. Even if people want to halt that, even if people want to contain that, it is not possible to do that anymore. Because as I said, technology has come a long way, and it's usually quite impossible. It's an impossible task to try and prevent technology from evolving and achieving its next step of evolution. And why is that? Why can't you prevent technology from evolving? You see, it's because the whole world surrounds itself and it's all of their needs, the needs of the people, the needs of the world, the needs of everyone that lives in this world, they all depend on technology. They all depend on the technology that humans have created. Everything is about technology. So even if you want to contain technology, you won't be able to do so, because there is a great need today for that technology. As I said, humanity and human beings, they can no longer understand the systems that they live on. Humanity and human beings are all the systems that the human race, that we in our world that we live in, we can no longer understand them. The systems have become too complicated, the systems have become too intricate, and humanity can no longer understand them. So then all of a sudden, if a problem happens, it could literally bring it all down in just a matter of moments. As I said, is a ticking time bomb. It's a time bomb that is constantly ticking, and you have a great need, a great urge for the humanity to control it. Because if humanity doesn't control it, then this ticking time bomb, it could go off and it could all come down regardless. So you could think of it as a gamble, right? It's perhaps humanity's greatest gamble. They are gambling it all. They are going all into technology, into machinery. So as I said, it is basically humanity's greatest gamble, or perhaps even its final gamble, because if the world is truly ending, then perhaps this would be, or this could be, humanity's not only greatest gamble, but also its last gamble, the last gamble that humanity and human beings are making. So it's essentially, as I said, if you can't control the systems anymore, if you can't understand them and therefore you can't if you can't understand them and therefore you cannot control them, so then at any moment something so huge, something so problematic could happen that it could bring it all down, and you wouldn't be able to see it coming, and you wouldn't be able to do anything about it. That is why technology is humanity's greatest gamble today, or perhaps its last gamble, the final gamble. They are gambling it all into technology, and especially into artificial intelligence, so that our artificial intelligence can understand it, so perhaps artificial intelligence can come to a better understanding of it all, and then to control it all, so that it can at all times be on top of things, be controlling it all, to make the systems work, the machine to be able to make it all work, and to understand it all, to understand everything that is happening, and to predict problems even before they arise, even before they happen. The machines would be able then to do something that humanity cannot. The machines and artificial intelligence would be able to do and go beyond what humanity could no longer be able to do, which is to understand the systems, control them, and make sure that no problems arise, make sure that they all work perfectly, and to predict problems from before it happens, and to provide solutions for these problems before it happens, right? So essentially, as I said, it's humanity's greatest hope, or final gamble, the last gamble, gambling it all into technology. And at this point, when it comes to the systems themselves, so as I said, it is a matter of perspective. It is a matter of where you choose to look, right? And if you're thinking about the systems themselves, then since it is a gamble, since it is the greatest gamble of it all, then it could either work or it could not, right? Maybe the systems, maybe the machines would work, maybe the machines would understand it, maybe the machines will control it, and maybe those machines will serve humanity and serve the humans, and then they'll be able to provide everything that the humans are hoping for in the world. And there you go, everything would be good, right? The systems would be good, the machines would control it, the machines would be able to control it all, to predict problems, and perhaps even to explain it to the humans, right? The machines would then be able to explain to the humans how the systems work, how everything works, and how to be on top of things, how to control it all, and to make sure that no problems ever arise, and that all the systems of the world and of society are working, and are working well, are properly working. But as I said, it's all a matter of perspective, right? And again, if you look at the people, if you look at the workers, if you look at the people that were once working for the systems, but now that these systems are being operated by machines, by machinery, and by artificial intelligence, and therefore that these systems that were once operated by people and the people working under these systems, then here comes the question, right? What happens to them? What will happen to these workers? What will happen to all these people that were working for the system, but now they won't be able to work anymore because the artificial intelligence and the machines will be taking the work for them? Essentially meaning that they will be out of a job, they will be jobless, they will no longer have a job, they will be unemployed. They won't have a job anymore, they won't have their work anymore, they won't be able to do the work and the job that they were once able to do. And you see, people depend on their jobs. People's lives depend on their jobs, on their wages, on their living wages, on their salaries that they receive from working at those jobs. People depend on it. They all depend on their jobs and the money that they made from the jobs. And you see, this is where things start to get really, really complicated, because when it comes to society and when it comes to the world and when it comes for everyone that lives in this world, then for the most part, or for the majority, people depend on jobs. People depend on the wages that they receive from those jobs. People depend on that money. People rely on that money. People rely on their salaries. People depend on their salaries and on their wages in order to live. That's how it has been for society. That's how it has been for society for a very, very long time now. For more than centuries, right? For more than centuries now, right? People would work, people would go for their jobs, people would receive their wages, and people would then try to live to the best of their abilities on those wages, on their salaries. And when it comes for the people who don't need those jobs, when it comes for the people who already have more than enough money to live and to not have to work, to not have to pursue a job, to not be able to obtain a job in order to get more money, in order to live with those wages. You see, the amount of people in our world, in our society, that has more than enough money to be able to live and to not have to work in order to earn wages so that they can go on living. The amount of people that we have today on our world that literally have more than enough money to be able to live without having to work is not all that high. It is a small percentage. It is a small percentage in our world. It is a small percentage that we have today of people that can work, that can have more than enough money, or that already had more than enough money to survive without having to work. We don't have a lot of people in our world that has more than enough money to survive and has no need for jobs. People for the most part need jobs. People for the most part need their wages in order to survive. And you don't have a large percentage of people who has more than enough money and that they can live without having to work, without having to seek jobs. It is a very, very small minority of people in our society that can live and that have more than enough money to live without having to work for it. There's not a lot of people in our world that have this kind of money and that can live and that can afford to go on living without having to work. So then here comes the question, and here is where things start to get really, really complicated. And as I said, it's all a matter of perspective here. What will happen to all of these people who will no longer have their work? What will happen to all of these people who no longer have their jobs? What will happen to all of these people who are counting on those salaries, on those wages in order to live? What will happen to them? And it's more than that, really. You see, that problem right there, it only gets worse. What do I mean by that? For example, think about the economy, think about commerce, think about transactions, think about even the whole capitalism systems themselves. If people no longer have jobs, if people no longer have money, if people can no longer go on to live with the money that they earn, what will happen to everything around? What will happen to even the capitalism systems themselves? If people no longer have money, then that means that people will no longer be able to afford buying things. And if people can't afford to buy anything, then that means that all these corporations, all of these factories, all of these companies that provide products and services, people will no longer be able to afford them. And even if you have a small fraction of people who can live and have more than enough money to live without having to work, since that fraction of people, since that amount of people is so very, very low compared to the whole world that we have, compared to the whole scenario that we have, compared to everything that we have around us, you see that small percentage of people, they aren't enough to maintain others' business, others' companies, others' factories, and even the capitalism systems themselves. And you see, here's where lies the problem too. It's not just the systems, it's not just companies and factories and corporations and services that were provided under these capitalism systems or other systems too that you have on the world. You could think of it even deeper. You could go even beyond and think about nations too, and about taxes too, right? If people no longer have jobs, if people no longer have money to live, then they won't be able to pay for taxes, because they won't be able to pay for anything anymore, because they won't have jobs, they won't have money anymore. So even nations themselves, they will no longer be able to collect taxes, because people won't have money to pay for those taxes. So you see, the problem, it only grows, right? It only gets worse, more and more and more and more and more. And you should think of it as a, no matter how big of a picture you think, it's even worse, because it involves everything and everyone, right? We're essentially talking about the systems of our world and how and the people that have been working for the systems, and how everything has operated and has been operated for centuries now. People have worked for these systems for centuries now. And people, for the most part, if not almost every single one of them, would be replaced by machines, by AI, by artificial intelligence. So the problem only gets worse no matter where you look, right? And as I said, it's all a matter of perspective, right? It's all a matter of where you look. And that's the problem right there. No matter where you look, things are really complicated. No matter where you look, things are very intricate. No matter where you look, things are very, very problematic. Because the systems of our world, the systems, they have evolved at such a high rate that humanity no longer understands it. Humanity can no longer hope to control it. At any moment, something could happen and bring it all down. And then by trying to solve it, by creating technology to solve it, you also create the great risk of also bringing it all down. So no matter where you look, as I said, it's a ticking time bomb. And if you leave that ticking time bomb there, it will explode. And if you don't do anything for the bomb there, it will also explode. And if you try to do something about that ticking time bomb, if you try to disarm it, it might also blow up. That's the problem right there. That's how bad things are, because essentially the whole systems of the world is one giant, huge, ticking time bomb. You're dealing with a time bomb here. You're dealing with something that is so far beyond human understanding that humans can no longer understand it, and humans can no longer control it, that at any moment it could all crashing down. With even the smallest problem could escalate and escalate and escalate and create mass panic, and then bring it all down. That's how bad it is. Again, because the systems have evolved at such a high point that humanity can no longer understand it. So the only hope that humanity has is to trust or rely onto machines to control it. But again, it's still a giant ticking time bomb, right? It's still a freaking bomb. It's a bomb. So if you try to do anything about it, it might go off, it might explode. And if you don't do anything, it might explode to you. So you see, that's the problem right there that we have on our world today. And that's the problem as I said, it's all about perspective, right? It's all about where you choose to look. And it doesn't look well. To me, no matter where you look, it doesn't look well. To me, as I said, it's a gamble. It's humanity's greatest gamble, or its final gamble, to trust it all into technology and to trust it all into artificial intelligence and hope to God that it works. But it might not. It might not work. And even if it works, it might still bring it all down all the same. Because as I said, you will be replacing humanity, you will be replacing human beings, you will be replacing all of the humans that were working for the systems. You would be replacing everyone and everything. And that's really the cause of the problem, and that's really why so many people are wondering if our world is ending. Because there are so many problems, so many problems, and humanity has no hope of solving them, because it's an evolution problem. It's a problem that has been created by evolution. And since we are evolving as a society, since we are evolving, and since the world is evolving, and since it has evolved at such a high stake, at such a high point, that humanity no longer has any hopes of understanding or controlling it, then all of a sudden this great problem, this great evolution problem that you have, you can only do a gamble, right? You can only do, as I said, humanity's perhaps final and last gamble, which it is to trust it all into technology, which it is to trust it all into artificial intelligence. But then here comes the problem again, right? What will happen to all of the people who were once working for the systems? What will happen to all companies and corporations and services and factories that were providing all these products and services for the people that were also working under the system? What will happen to nations that rely on taxes in order to keep all of their services working as well? What will happen then? So to me, the problem is so great, the problem is so complicated, and as I said, it is a gamble, and the gamble could literally not pay off, and it could all go down all the same. Even if the gamble is successful, it could also bring it down all the same. You see, the problem is so great, so very great, that essentially you're dealing with something that so many people, as I said, you have such a small amount of people who have enough money to live without having to work. You have such a small percentage of people who has the money in order to live, and all the rest of the people in society, they don't have that if all of a sudden, you could think of it this way: if you have 90% of our world, 90% of society, and when I say 90%, I'm probably being kind here, because probably it's a much higher probability than this, but or percentage than this. But if you have 90% of the people in our world who don't have enough money to live without having to work, and are living basically paycheck to paycheck and trying to live to the best of their abilities with what little money they have and what little money they gain from their wages, right? If you have that, and then you have 10% of people who have enough money to live, and who have enough money to live without having to work, what will happen once this 90% of people, once they no longer have a job, and once they can no longer live with the wages, with the jobs that they have? What will happen once all of them are out of their jobs? Because evolution has happened, because machines have evolved to such a high standard that they will replace everything and everyone in all directions and every places. There won't be a service that a human being can do, something that a human being can do, that the machines won't be able to do it better. What will happen then? What will happen to society? What will happen to economy? What will happen to all the business, all the companies, all of the factories, all of the services, all of the taxes, all of the nations, basically everyone, right? What will happen to the world once technology replaces human beings? If you only have 10% of people who have money to live without having to work, then all of a sudden you have a huge problem, because the rest 90% won't have that money. They won't have that. They just won't have that money. And then there's a high chance that a situation that was already getting pretty bad, right? Because if you have a lot of people that are unemployed, if you have a lot of people that don't have jobs, if you have a lot of people that are poor and that don't have money, then the most obvious things start to happen, right? You start to have a lot of chaos around. You start to have a lot of violence, a lot of theft. You start to have a lot of poverty, a lot of misery, a lot of diseases. You start to have a lot of problems there. It's not like the moment that the people lose their jobs. It's not like the moment that the people lose their wages. It's not like they just disappear. No, they don't. They still are alive, and they still very much wish to keep being alive, to keep living. And it's not just them either. You have families, you have loved ones. You have a lot of people that depend on those jobs and on those wages. And if it all goes down, then there's a really high chance, and to me this chance is really, really high, that it will be a very chaotic scenario all around. So then you ask yourself, what's going to happen next? And you see, this is where the problem lies, right here. And as I keep telling you, it's a matter of perspective, right? And no matter where you look at this, I don't see a scenario where things are necessarily good. Even if this gamble pays off, it doesn't necessarily bodes a nice scenario here. It's pretty bad. All around, it can be pretty bad. And it can be really chaotic, and it's something that is fastly approaching, because it's already happening today. And we're not necessarily seeing people trying to unite and trying to do something about this problem, or to prepare themselves for this problem. You don't really see that happening here. And to me, whenever I think about humanity, whenever I think about human beings, whenever I think about the world, if human beings unite, if humanity unites, then I don't think there is a single problem on this earth that humanity and human beings aren't able to solve. And you see, I could go on talking about this, and of course I want to, and sadly we are already approaching an hour here of the video. So what I think I'm going to do is that I'm going to do a part 3 of this video. And well, it's a really complicated problem, right? It's a really complicated topic, and no matter where you look at it, since it's so complicated, it's not something that I can, or at least for me, it's not something that I can so easily talk about in such a small amount of time. It's something that takes a long time to ponder and to reflect. But I think I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do a part 3, and I'm going to ponder more about this topic at the next video, so it's not too overwhelming in just one video. But for now, this is where I'm going to stop, and for now this is where I'm going to stop it here. But I promise that I'm still going to talk about it. I'm going to do a part 3. I'm going to pick up exactly where I left off, and we'll talk more about this soon in another video. But for now, I wish to thank you all, or for you that is listening to the video. I thank you. And if you listen to this video, if you listen all the way, then I thank you again. Truly, thank you very much. And by all means, if you wanna add more, if you wanna provide more details, if you wanna perhaps talk about a few things that I haven't said here in this video, then please, by all means, do so. Write it down in the comments, and I'll be very, very happy to read all that you have to say about this topic at hand. But for now, this is where I'm going to end. But thank you again. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. And as I said, if you listen all the way to the end, then I thank you once more. Really, truly, thank you. And hopefully we will soon see each other again very, very soon. Thank you again. Goodbye.